I never imagined that one casual comment from my boss could completely flip my life upside down. One morning, she leaned across her desk, smiled in that precise, unnerving way, and said, "You really should start dressing properly as a woman." I froze. The words echoed in my mind like a warning bell. I laughed nervously at first, assuming she was joking. But the gleam in her eyes told me she wasn't. "My name is Ryan, 32, average height, fairly fit but not remarkable, and completely unprepared for the chaos that was about to unfold. I worked at an advertising firm in the city, a place where creativity thrived but so did control. My boss, Vanessa, was known for her perfectionism, her sharp gaze, and an uncanny ability to make you doubt yourself even while you thought you were confident. That morning started like any other. I strolled into the office, coffee in hand, half asleep, my tie slightly crooked. Vanessa's office door was ajar, and she called me in with that clipped tone I had learned to obey. "Ryan," she said, leaning back in her leather chair, arms folded. "Your presentation last week was acceptable, but it's lacking finesse. Like your appearance." I chuckled, trying to make light of it. "Appearance? I thought my suit was fine, Vanessa." Her smile was faint, almost predatory. "Fine doesn't cut it anymore. From now on, I expect proper attire. Professional. Polished. And for you, that means," she paused, letting the suspense stretch like a rubber band, "dressing as a woman." I blinked, unsure if I had heard correctly. My brain stumbled, tried to form a coherent response, but all that came out was a choked laugh. "You're joking," I managed. "No joke," she replied smoothly, her tone unwavering. "Tomorrow morning, I want you at the office in the outfit we discussed. Don't disappoint me." I left her office in a daze, the words bouncing around my skull. Dress as a woman. Every rational part of me screamed against it. And yet a smaller, quieter part wondered, what if she really meant it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my tiny apartment, imagining how it could even be possible. My wardrobe consisted of suits, ties, casual shirts, not exactly women's fashion. And even if I managed to find something wearable, what about makeup? Hair? High heels? The idea made my stomach churn, my palms sweat. I tried calling a friend for advice, but my fingers hovered over the phone. How could I possibly explain this without sounding insane? I ended up scrolling aimlessly through social media, watching women's fashion tutorials, my anxiety growing with every click. By the next morning, the reality hit me hard. Vanessa wasn't joking. She had that kind of control, the kind that made people obey. I had two choices: comply or face her wrath, and I knew firsthand that refusing Vanessa's orders was not an option. I took a deep breath and opened the wardrobe. My hands shook as I pulled out a modest pencil skirt borrowed from a cousin who worked in retail. I paired it with a blouse, then hesitated at the shoes. Heels. My eyes fell on a pair of black pumps tucked under the bed. The thought of wearing them made my knees wobble. By the time I was fully dressed, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The skirt hugged my waist, the blouse made my shoulders look delicate, and the heels forced me to adjust my posture constantly. I tried to straighten my back, lift my chin, and walk like Vanessa's proper woman. Each step was an awkward negotiation with gravity. Arriving at the office, I was a bundle of nerves. My heart raced as I walked down the corridor, heels clicking loudly on the polished floor. Every colleague's head turned. Whispers floated through the air like tiny arrows aimed at me. Vanessa stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her lips. "Good morning, Ryan," she said. "You're punctual. I like that. And impressive." I forced a shaky smile, praying I hadn't ruined everything in the first 5 seconds. She stepped closer, inspecting me from head to toe. "Not bad. The blouse fits, the skirt is acceptable. But your posture, work on it. You'll need to glide, not stumble. And the heels, Ryan, they should feel natural." I swallowed hard, imagining natural, in a situation where my legs already threatened mutiny. Meetings that morning were a nightmare of self-consciousness. Every glance at my reflection in the glass conference room walls reminded me that I looked different. Vulnerable. Exposed. And I hated the way some colleagues' eyes lingered a fraction too long, analyzing, judging, amused. Vanessa's presence was constant, a subtle pressure. She didn't scold or mock, but her approval felt like a tightrope I had to walk perfectly. One misstep, and I could feel the consequences of disobedience, the disappointment, the whispers. Lunch was another trial. I had to navigate the cafeteria, balancing my tray while keeping my posture rigid, heels clicking unnaturally. A friend waved, smiling politely, but I noticed the hesitation in their eyes. They were curious, confused, and I hated being the spectacle. By the end of the day, exhaustion weighed on me like a heavy cloak. My back ached, my legs burned, and my mind was a whirlwind of shame, fear, and disbelief. And yet, a tiny, reluctant part of me realized I had survived. I had obeyed. When I returned home, I collapsed on the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. The ordeal of the day replayed in my mind, each awkward step, each careful word, each approving or disapproving glance from Vanessa. And as I drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought lingered, cold and relentless. Tomorrow will be even harder. As I closed my eyes, I heard a faint knock at the door. A voice, soft and chillingly familiar, whispered through the crack. "You think today was hard, Ryan? Wait until you see the expectations I have for my perfect employee as a woman." The next morning, I woke before my alarm, dread and anticipation knotting together like a vice. Every muscle in my body ached from the previous day, heels, posture, self-conscious tension, but I knew there was no escaping it. Vanessa's expectations loomed over me like a storm cloud. I dressed meticulously, checking every detail. Skirt straight, blouse tucked, heels buckled. My reflection still felt alien. I didn't recognize the face staring back at me. Makeup carefully applied to soften my features only emphasized how wrong it felt, how unnatural. Yet there was no denying the power of her control. Every choice I had made, every movement, had been dictated by her invisible hand. As I approached the office, the hallways felt narrower than usual, every step in heels making my legs ache, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Colleagues glanced at me, some with curiosity, others with barely hidden amusement. Whispers trailed in my wake. I kept my head high, shoulders back, forcing the grace Vanessa demanded. Vanessa was waiting near the entrance, her posture perfect, eyes sharp, scanning the office floor. She saw me and a faint, approving smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Good morning, Ryan," she said smoothly. Or should I say, Raylan? I froze mid-step. Her words sliced through me, confirming what I had feared. She was already shaping my identity, assigning a new name for the new version of me. My stomach twisted. The morning passed in a haze of intense scrutiny. Every task, typing reports, answering calls, organizing files, was observed, corrected, and critiqued. Vanessa's voice was a constant presence, subtle but omnipresent. "Adjust your posture when you sit," she instructed. "The shoulders forward, spine straight. Elegance, Ryan." "Yes, ma'am," I whispered, voice tight. She circled the office, eyes lingering, almost predatory. "And your voice softer. Softer, please. Remember, refinement is everything." Even the smallest errors, mispronounced words, a stray pencil, a slightly crooked note were noticed and corrected. My mind spun with exhaustion, but I forced myself to comply, knowing resistance would only make things worse. By lunchtime, my legs felt like lead. My heels ached, my back burned, and my hands were clammy from tension. I walked to the cafeteria, every movement a delicate negotiation with the unfamiliar clothes and posture. A colleague approached me, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. "Ryan, Raylan, right? You look different today." I forced a polite smile. "Yes, different is good." Her smile was tentative, but I caught the flicker of amusement. Everyone seemed to notice. Everyone seemed to measure me, test me. I realized the office had transformed into a stage, and I was the unwilling actor. After lunch, Vanessa called me into her office again. The door closed behind me with a definitive click, sealing me in. Sit, she instructed. I obeyed immediately. She leaned back, studying me. You did reasonably well this morning. But refinement is not just about posture or voice. It's about total transformation. Your appearance, your habits, your very demeanor, everything will reflect the version of yourself I expect. I swallowed hard. And if I fail? Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of amusement in her expression. Failure is not an option, Ryan. You will adapt, or you will cease to fit here. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. The warning was subtle, but unmistakable. Adapt, or risk losing everything I knew about myself. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. Vanessa assigned me tasks specifically designed to test every aspect of my new role, answering calls in a soft, polished voice, arranging meetings with flawless attention to detail, even learning to pour tea without spilling a drop. Every error, no matter how small, was noted. Every success, no matter how minor, was measured against an impossible standard. By the time the clock struck 5, my body was numb, my mind exhausted. I slipped out of the office, heels clacking with a hollow rhythm, my reflection in the glass doors catching me mid-step. I hardly recognized the person staring back. At home, I collapsed on my couch, trembling. Michelle, my friend who had once warned me about difficult bosses, could not have prepared me for this. This was more than a dress code. This was control. Identity manipulation. Subtle, relentless, and inescapable. I stared at the heels and skirt I had worn all day, wondering how much of Ryan still remained beneath the carefully constructed exterior. Just as I closed my eyes, my phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. Impressive first day, Raylan. But tomorrow, I expect even more. Be ready to prove you belong. And underneath, a single photo. Me. In full outfit, standing at my desk, captured without my knowledge. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, hoping to steel myself for whatever Vanessa had planned. But the minute I stepped through the door, I realized today would be different. The usual hum of the office was replaced by a quiet tension, a kind of anticipatory energy that made my stomach twist. Vanessa's assistant, a tall, composed woman named Clarissa, met me at the entrance. She's expecting you, she said softly, gesturing toward the elevator. There was no hint of explanation, only the certainty that obedience was required. The elevator ride felt unusually long. I stared at my reflection in the polished metal, adjusting the blouse and skirt I had worn the day before. My heels clicked lightly, a reminder of how every step was now scrutinized even outside Vanessa's direct gaze. When the doors opened, I found myself in a part of the office I had never seen. Plush carpets replaced the usual tiles. Bookshelves lined the walls. A faint scent of lavender and polished wood filled the air. Vanessa stood behind a sleek mahogany desk, a stack of neatly folded blouses and skirts at her side. Good morning, Raylan, she said, her tone smooth, precise, almost melodic. Today, we begin private lessons. Alone. This is where refinement is not optional. You will learn subtleties others overlook, details that separate the competent from the perfect. My throat went dry. Private lessons? She nodded, a small smile curving her lips. Yes. You will follow my instructions exactly. Every word, every movement, every expression will be observed. Mistakes will be noted, corrected, and repeated until flawless. The first lesson was posture. Vanessa demonstrated a walk across the room, heels clicking in perfect rhythm, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, eyes soft but attentive. I watched, memorized, then tried to mimic. My first attempts were clumsy heels wobbling, skirts swaying awkwardly. Stop, Vanessa said calmly. Your hips. Do not sway. Elegance is control. Every movement precise, measured. Again. I repeated the walk, each step a careful calculation. She observed silently, occasionally making slight adjustments to my shoulders or the tilt of my head. It was meticulous, exhausting, and humiliating but strangely compelling. Next came voice control. Vanessa had me recite office greetings, phrases, and even casual small talk. Softly but clearly. Warmth in your tone, charm without frivolity, she instructed. I stumbled over the words. My voice, usually confident and casual, sounded foreign in my own ears. She corrected my pitch, inflection, and even my breathing. Each adjustment chipped away at my natural mannerisms, molding me into the precise image she envisioned. By mid-morning, my brain felt like it had been sifted through a fine mesh. Each correction, each repetition, wore me down mentally, leaving only the shell she approved of. Lunch was served in the private office. Vanessa instructed me on table manners, how to hold utensils, how to sip tea elegantly, how to position my hands when speaking. Every movement required concentration, every glance deliberate. You must understand, Vanessa said as she observed me pour tea. These lessons are not just for show. They are the foundation of your transformation. Control the body, and the mind will follow. I nodded, unable to speak. My hands trembled slightly as I balanced the delicate china. The afternoon was devoted to makeup and hairstyling. Vanessa instructed me on subtle application techniques, how to enhance my features without appearing exaggerated, how to manage hair to frame the face correctly. My reflection became increasingly unfamiliar. This is not just appearance, she said, circling me like a predator assessing her prey. It is perception. Others will see you the way I want them to. You will move, speak, and exist as a demonstration of refinement and obedience. By the end of the day, exhaustion and mental fatigue left me reeling. I had followed every instruction, repeated every exercise, absorbed every correction. I felt smaller, reshaped, both terrified and strangely compelled. Vanessa handed me a mirror and said softly, "Look at yourself, Raylan. This is your starting point. Tomorrow, you will continue more refined, more disciplined. And remember, perfection is not suggested. It is required." As I walked back to my desk, a folded envelope slid silently across the floor toward me. Inside, in neat, precise handwriting, were 2 words that made my stomach plummet. Next alone. The next morning, my stomach was a knot of dread as I rode the elevator to the top floor again. This time there was no Clarissa, no polite greeting, no hint of normal office life. Just silence, heavy and expectant, like the air before a storm. Vanessa's door was already open. She stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, the faintest trace of a smile on her lips. "Good morning, Raylan," she said. "Leave your bag at the door. Today, you work with nothing but yourself." I hesitated. "Work? As in obedience," she interrupted smoothly. "Sit." I obeyed, heart hammering. The room had been rearranged overnight. The desk and chairs were pushed aside. The floor was bare except for a single line of tape and a small table with tea things, stationery, and a phone. There were mirrors on the walls now, reflecting every angle of me. "You will complete 3 tasks," Vanessa said. "You will do them alone, without prompting. You will follow the instructions exactly. There will be no feedback until the end. If you succeed, we continue to refine you. If you fail," she tilted her head. "You know what failure means." I swallowed hard, throat dry. The first task was deceptively simple. Compose an apology letter to a client we had upset, using exactly the tone, language, and formatting Vanessa preferred. I sat at the small table, pen in hand, feeling the weight of invisible eyes. I wrote carefully, trying to channel the polished, graceful voice she had drilled into me. Every word felt like a test. I erased and rewrote, imagining her corrections, her raised eyebrow, her subtle disapproval. The second task was to serve tea again. But this time, no one was there to guide me. No one to correct posture or gestures. Only the mirrors reflecting my every move. I poured, walked, placed, and curtsied to empty air, imagining Vanessa watching from some hidden vantage point. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to continue, each step slower, more deliberate. The third task was the hardest. I had to phone a senior partner and deliver a rehearsed greeting, using the softer voice and precise inflection Vanessa demanded, without stumbling, without sounding false. My finger hovered over the dial. My heart thudded painfully. This isn't me, I thought.
This isn't how I speak.
But I pressed the button anyway. When the voice answered, I launched into the greeting, every syllable controlled. By the end, my palms were slick with sweat, but I hadn't faltered. When I put the phone down, the silence was suffocating. The mirrors reflected a stranger back at me, a person moving, speaking, and writing exactly as instructed. My head spun. Then Vanessa's voice came, not from the room, but from a speaker overhead. Well done, Raylan. You've proven you can perform under observation. But tomorrow, her voice dropped lower, darker. Tomorrow, you will perform without knowing who's watching. I turned to the door. It was still closed. My bag was gone. For a heartbeat, I wondered if she'd locked me in. Just as I reached for the handle, a soft click echoed through the room. The lights dimmed, and a single spotlight snapped on over the mirrors. In the reflection, behind me, stood Vanessa, silent, smiling though the room itself was empty. The following morning, I woke with a hollow weight pressing on my chest. Every nerve in my body was still on edge from the previous day's isolation exercise. Vanessa's presence had lingered in my mind, her voice echoing, her smile haunting. I dressed mechanically, skirt straight, blouse tucked, heels firmly fastened, makeup carefully applied. I didn't recognize the reflection anymore. Michelle, my friend outside the office, had texted me that morning. You okay? You seem different. I stared at my reflection, answering only in silence. Different didn't begin to cover it. When I arrived at the office, Vanessa greeted me in her usual calm, exacting manner. Today, she said, we take refinement out of this room. Into the real world. Public appearances will accelerate your transformation faster than private lessons ever could. My stomach turned. Public. She nodded.
Yes.
You will accompany me to the client meeting this afternoon. As Raylan. Every movement, every word, every glance will reflect what you've learned. Any hesitation, any misstep, and the consequences will be immediate. I swallowed hard, imagining colleagues, clients, and strangers all seeing me in skirts and heels, perfectly poised but completely unnatural.
The day dragged.
Vanessa meticulously observed every task, every interaction. Even mundane activities, typing emails, answering calls, felt like rehearsals for the upcoming performance. My back ached from constant correction. My heels left painful impressions on my feet. Every glance in the mirror reminded me I was being molded, reshaped, tested. By the afternoon, the time came. Vanessa led me out of the office, into a sleek car waiting below. She sat beside me, perfectly composed. You'll handle yourself with grace, she said, adjusting the seatbelt across my chest. And remember, confidence is manufactured, but it must appear natural. The client office was intimidating. High ceilings, glass walls, and people moving briskly through corridors. I walked in heels that now felt like extensions of my own feet, posture taut, hands in the precise position Vanessa had drilled. Vanessa introduced me smoothly. Everyone meet Raylan. She will be assisting me today. The room turned. I could feel every eye on me, weighing me, analyzing me. Some expressions were curious, some amused, others judgmental. I faltered for a heartbeat, but Vanessa's gaze pinned me. I straightened, breathed, and entered my role fully. The meeting itself was grueling. I delivered reports, passed files, and even spoke briefly when prompted. Every syllable, every movement had been rehearsed. I caught the smallest micro-expression from Vanessa, a nod of approval, a slight twitch of her lips. Her satisfaction was the only thing keeping me upright. When we left, I felt physically drained. My legs ached. My back screamed. But more than the pain, the mental exhaustion of being constantly observed, constantly performing, left me hollow. At home that evening, I sat quietly, staring at my wardrobe. The skirts, blouses, and heels seemed almost to taunt me. I realized this wasn't just a dress code anymore. This was shaping who I was. Shaping me entirely. Just as I thought I could finally breathe, my phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. Raylan, tomorrow you will dine with the partners alone. They will not know you, but I will be watching. Do not disappoint me. A chill ran down my spine. Alone under her scrutiny, in public, what had I agreed to? The next day, anxiety gripped me like a vice as I dressed. The skirts and blouse that had once seemed alien now felt almost normal, though my body still rebelled with every step in heels. Makeup carefully applied, hair styled just as Vanessa had instructed, I looked into the mirror and barely recognized myself. Raylan stared back, elegant, poised, and utterly foreign. A message from Vanessa appeared on my phone. Dining starts at 7 o'clock. Arrive prepared. You will follow instructions exactly. Confidence is mandatory. Remember, every detail is observed. I swallowed hard. Confidence mandatory. The words echoed ominously. The restaurant was upscale, quiet but polished. Low lighting, crisp table settings, and the soft murmur of conversations created an atmosphere I could hardly navigate without Vanessa's guiding presence. Except she wasn't there. She had left me to arrive alone. My heels clicked on the marble floor. I felt every gaze from strangers, their eyes scanning me, measuring me. I forced my posture, kept my voice soft yet firm, and followed the etiquette Vanessa had drilled into me. The first challenge was seating. A waiter approached, offering a menu. I had to accept gracefully, place the napkin on my lap without hesitation, and maintain composure while perusing the options. My hands shook as I set the menu down, but I reminded myself, this is training, survival. Then came introductions. The partners we were meeting didn't know me, but I had to speak and behave flawlessly. My voice was refined, my expressions polite, my laughter timed perfectly. Every reaction was calculated, every gesture deliberate. Midway through dinner, a partner asked a question about a project I had little involvement in. My mind scrambled. Panic prickled at my temples. I repeated the rehearsed phrases Vanessa had taught me, inserting polite nods, subtle smiles, and measured gestures. The partners seemed satisfied. I exhaled quietly under the table, though my heart still raced. Vanessa's presence was missing physically, but I imagined her watching. I could feel the invisible scrutiny pressing on me with every word, every glance, every sip of water. I realized that in her eyes, failure was impossible to hide. The meal stretched on, each course a new test, handling silverware elegantly, maintaining poise while navigating conversation, keeping my voice soft yet confident, and adjusting posture for every tiny interaction. My mind was exhausted, but I forced myself to stay alert. The smallest misstep would be noticed, perhaps even recorded for critique later. By the time dessert arrived, my legs ached, my back screamed, and my hands were slightly trembling. Yet somehow I had survived. Somehow I had maintained the facade of Raylan. When I returned home that evening, collapsing onto the couch, I realized the full weight of what Vanessa was doing. This was no longer a dress code, no longer a private game. She was reshaping me, controlling me, forcing me to adopt an identity piece by piece. And each success only made me wonder, how far could I resist before I fully became Raylan? Just as I sank into exhausted relief, my phone buzzed again. A single message from Vanessa. Impressive performance. Tomorrow, you will host the morning briefing as Raylan. Alone. Everyone will watch. Do not falter. My stomach dropped. Hosting alone meant scrutiny on a level I had never experienced. Could I maintain the perfection she demanded, or would I crumble under the gaze of the entire office? The next morning, I woke before dawn, my mind spinning. My reflection in the mirror showed Raylan polished, poised, and carefully constructed, but my nerves betrayed me. Today wasn't just another day. Today I had to host the morning briefing entirely alone. Every word, every gesture, every glance of my colleagues would be measured. I could feel Vanessa's invisible gaze already pressing down. I dressed meticulously, skirt straight, blouse tucked, heels fastened. Makeup applied with precision, hair styled to perfection. Even the smallest detail mattered. My hands shook slightly as I adjusted the cuffs of my blouse. Focus. You can do this. Arriving at the office, I noticed an unusual quiet. The staff were gathered in the conference room, whispers hushed, eyes curious. Vanessa wasn't there yet. That meant this was the ultimate test of independence, and the pressure was suffocating. I walked to the front of the room, heels clicking on the floor, posture taut. Every head turned, every eye fixed on me. My stomach twisted. This was the moment where all my private lessons, public appearances, and subtle training would collide. Taking a deep breath, I began. Good morning, everyone. Let's review the progress on this week's projects. My voice was steady, soft yet confident, echoing the refinement Vanessa had drilled into me. At first, small murmurs of curiosity rippled through the room. I introduced the agenda, handed out notes, and navigated questions with a precise balance of politeness and authority. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture practiced. Midway through the briefing, a senior colleague interrupted with a challenging question. My heart pounded. This wasn't rehearsed. I hesitated just a fraction of a second and felt panic claw at my mind. Then I remembered Vanessa's lessons. Control your posture, control your voice, control your presence. I straightened my back, softened my tone, and answered clearly, politely, and with subtle charm. The colleague nodded, seemingly satisfied. A surge of relief ran through me, but I forced myself to remain composed. The remainder of the meeting was grueling. Each interaction required precise eye contact, soft smiles, careful phrasing, and exact timing. Every micro-expression of surprise, doubt, or confusion from my colleagues had to be met with perfect poise. By the end, my legs ached, my voice was hoarse, and my mind was buzzing with exhaustion. But somehow I had survived. I had led the briefing as Raylan. I had maintained the illusion completely alone. When I returned to my desk, a sense of hollow triumph washed over me. I was exhausted physically and mentally, yet a tiny, uncomfortable part of me began to wonder. How much of Ryan remained underneath Raylan's polished exterior? Every lesson, every challenge, every public interaction was molding me further. And then my phone buzzed. A single message from Vanessa appeared. Congratulations, Raylan. You survived the first solo challenge. But tomorrow, you will learn the art of charm. And you will do so in front of clients without me present. Failure is not an option. I stared at the screen, heart racing. Clients without her guidance?
Alone?
The thought made my stomach twist. How could I maintain perfection under the weight of their scrutiny and hers from afar? The next morning, dread settled over me like a heavy fog. Vanessa's message replayed in my mind. You will learn the art of charm in front of clients. Failure is not an option. My reflection in the mirror showed Raylan, poised and elegant, but my nerves betrayed me. Every detail mattered: skirt straight, blouse tucked, heels perfect, makeup flawless. One slip could undo everything. The car ride to the client's office was silent. My stomach knotted. Vanessa had left instructions. I would enter alone, greet the clients, and guide the meeting with a mixture of grace, professionalism, and subtle charm. She wouldn't be there to intervene, yet I felt her presence, omnipresent and watching. The client's office was sleek and intimidating, full of glass walls, polished surfaces, and people who immediately sized me up. I entered, heels clicking lightly, posture taut, hands placed precisely where Vanessa had instructed. Good morning, I said softly but confidently. I'm Raylan, assisting with today's agenda. The client's eyes flicked over me, some curious, some skeptical, others quietly amused. My heart pounded, but I forced a smile, recalling Vanessa's insistence on warmth, poise, and subtle charm. The meeting began. I handed out documents, answered questions, and facilitated discussion. Every word, every gesture had been drilled into me during my private lessons. I smiled at the right moments, nodded subtly, and maintained soft eye contact. My palms were slick with sweat, my legs trembling slightly from the heels, but I forced myself to stay composed. One client leaned forward with a challenging question about a previous campaign. My throat went dry. I repeated the practiced phrases, modulating my voice for clarity, charm, and authority. I added small gestures, softening my tone with polite expressions. To my surprise, the client nodded, seemingly satisfied. Throughout the meeting, I felt the invisible pressure of Vanessa's expectations pressing down on me. Every reaction, every glance from the clients was a test. Every slight hesitation, mispronunciation, or misstep could be noted later for correction. My mind raced to anticipate questions, frame answers, and maintain the illusion of confidence. By the end of the session, the clients were smiling, nodding, and even complimenting my professionalism. My relief was tempered by exhaustion. Maintaining Raylan under scrutiny had drained every ounce of mental and physical energy. After the meeting, I returned to the office, legs trembling from hours in heels, back aching from posture correction, and mind spinning from mental exertion. Vanessa wasn't there, but a note lay on my desk. Excellent work, Raylan. You handled the challenge with grace. Tomorrow, we escalate. You will host a full presentation alone to the board. As I read the note, a chill ran down my spine. Alone in front of the board? Without her guidance? I sank into my chair, realizing the next day would push me further than anything so far. Could I maintain perfection under the ultimate scrutiny, or would Raylan finally fracture under pressure? The next morning, my nerves were frayed to the limit. Vanessa's note from the previous day replayed in my mind like a warning. You will host a full presentation alone to the board. My reflection showed Raylan polished, elegant, precise, but my stomach churned. Every detail had to be perfect. Skirt straight, blouse immaculate, heels fastened, makeup flawless. The drive to the office was torturous. I rehearsed phrases under my breath, memorized gestures, and tried to steady the trembling in my hands. Vanessa had been clear. One misstep could undo all progress. One failure could set me back days, or worse. As I entered the boardroom, the air felt thicker than usual. High ceilings, polished wood, and a long table surrounded by chairs. The board members were already seated, their eyes immediately on me. Every glance weighed me, measured me. Good morning, I said, my voice soft but controlled. I am Raylan, and I will be presenting today's quarterly report. The murmurs stopped. Silence fell. All eyes were on me. My heart pounded, legs slightly trembling from the heels. I adjusted my posture, tilted my chin subtly upward, and began. The presentation required more than just reading slides. I had to answer questions, handle objections, and maintain poise throughout. Each board member seemed to test me, throwing questions that had no prepared answers. My mind raced. I drew upon every lesson Vanessa had taught me. Measured tone, soft but confident voice, precise gestures, subtle charm. One particularly difficult question about budget allocation made my stomach twist. I paused, then smiled lightly, tilted my head subtly, and answered with careful phrasing. The board member nodded slowly, seemingly impressed. Midway through, I could feel sweat forming along my spine. Every minor hiccup felt catastrophic. Yet, every correction I had practiced in private came instinctively now. Posture adjustments, controlled breathing, softened tone, small polite gestures. By the end, I was drained, trembling, but the presentation concluded without any noticeable missteps. As I collected the papers and nodded politely, the board members offered nods and murmured approvals. I exhaled, relief washing over me, though the exhaustion left me almost numb. Back at my desk, I finally allowed myself to collapse into the chair. My reflection in the glass partition caught my attention. Raylan stared back every gesture, every movement, every word shaped by Vanessa's exacting standards. I realized just how far I had been molded. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. Excellent. You survived the boardroom test. But now, Raylan, we move to final refinement. Your ultimate challenge begins tomorrow. My stomach dropped. Final refinement, ultimate challenge? I stared at the message, heart hammering, knowing that tomorrow would change everything. Could Ryan resist, or was Raylan now inevitable?